Hey everybody, the purpose of this video is to show you how to get some raw data into Excel and then create a histogram from that raw data. So we start here with some very old 1993 gas mileages given to us by the EPA. Doesn't really matter that they're old. All that matters is that it's raw data. It's in a table form in a PDF document. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab it, we're going to left click and hold, and then we're going to drag down until all the data is collected. That's selected now. We're going to right click somewhere on that highlight, and then we're going to go to copy. And then we're going to go to Excel, and we are going to left click in cell A1, and I'm going to hit Control V. Boom. And what that did was it dropped it straight down. It looks like one data point per column all the way down to A50. Good. Or one data point per cell, excuse me. Depending on the original source formatting of the data you're pulling from, it might do that. It might also drop it in different forms. Do some Google searching if it drops it into a form you don't understand. There are many different ways you can get out of that mess. So anyway, all my data is in a nice straight line, A1, A2, A3 down to A50. I'm going to refer back to the original document, because what I asked you to do here was to use 6 classes, starting with 25 to 28 and ending with 45 to 48. So let's start by typing those in, 25 to 28. Okay, notice that this is a different font. I'm going to select the whole thing and change everything to Calibri 12 point. How's that sound? Sounds good. And then 29 to 32, and then 33 to 36, 37 to 40, 41 to 44, oops, I typed 42, 41 to 44, and 45 to 48. And please notice that that corresponded, that worked very nicely. 6 classes, just like I asked you to do over here. Okay, 25 to 28, 45 to 48. Now, I had given you some instructions in the original part of the document that actually had that in column C. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where your data is. I wanted to put it here first because I wanted to show you something, and then I'm going to move the stuff around. What confuses people routinely when they're working in Excel is what to tell Excel to use for bins. Bins are numbers that define the columns, and so here's the way you pick the bins once you know what your class's widths are. This one's bin is 28. This one's bin is 32. This one's bin is 36. This one's bin is 40. And this one's bin is 44. This one's bin you might think should be 48, but as it turns out, you don't need any more bins other than that. And what I like to do right now is I want to stop this part of the video and go to a little bit of a chalkboard presentation to explain to you why these are the only bins you need. So we'll jump over there and jump back over here. Hey everybody, here's the chalkboard component to the Excel histogram video, and what I wanted to explain is just those bins, why the bins go 28, 32, 36, 40, and 44. What you have to realize is Excel can't think. Thank God. Computers can't think for themselves. At least these spreadsheets can't. You have to help them think. They do things very well. They do things very quickly, but they can't think, and they can't process this kind of move. So essentially, what Excel has is it's got this bunch of numbers that it needs to put on a horizontal axis. Now, in Excel, as you saw, we had them listed vertically. It wants to put them in order horizontally. So we know that the smallest value that it's looking for down here is 25, and the largest value that it's looking up here for is 48. And there's a whole bunch of numbers between. What Excel has to be able to do is to take that information right there. It has to take that information right there and know that the numbers are there, and you have to help it decide where to put up markers to break up that line of numbers to make 6 bars altogether. Okay, so the first bar, I told you to use a bin of 28 because the first bar was 25 to 28. So essentially, it doesn't need a bar on this side because it knows it's just going to pick the smallest value in that line. It needs a bar on this side to trap the low numbers up to the number, in this case 28. And from that, it can build a bar, however tall that bar needs to be. Fair so far? Good. Now, it needs to pick the numbers bigger than 28, but up to a certain value. Now, again, you don't have to use the same distance. 25 to 28 is 4 wide. 25, 26, 27, 28. The next bar is 29, 30, 31, 32. Nobody says that you have to use the exact same distance between them. It's just good mathematics to do that. So that bar, however high it's going to be, is going to go from technically 28 to 32. Although, because your numbers are whole numbers, it's actually going to start counting at 29. But Excel doesn't know that. Excel has no idea. You have to train it to think this way. The next one is going to be at 36. The next one's going to be at 40. And the next one's going to be, sorry about this, it's running out of space, 44. Now notice, up till that point, you've only got 5 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's the last bin you put in was 44. That's because Excel now knows you've got this out to this. It's going to count anything above 44. And you know that the biggest possible value in there is 48. So there's absolutely no reason to go any higher than that. Now the reason this is kind of slick, you have to think of it like you're building a fence. I mean, for lack of a better comparator, only because this happened to me about a year ago. You've got a wall on this side, and you've got a wall on this side that you can tie into. That saves you the money from having to put supports up there. And you've got to mount these pieces of fence, if you will, these pieces of fence. Well, those pieces of fence need supports between them. If you can tie into this wall and tie into this wall, then you don't need a post there or a post there. You only need the posts in the middle here. And that's really all you have to do. Excel knows that wall because it's going to be the smallest data value in the data set. It knows that wall because it's going to be the biggest data value in the data set. What it needs are the pop, 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 pop in the middle. So if you have 6 columns you want in your histogram, you need 5 bins. If you have 10 columns, you need 9 bins. If you've got 20 columns, you need 19 bins. It's always going to be 1 less bin than the number of columns that you have, because Excel just needs the dividers, and hopefully that makes sense when we go back to make the histogram in Excel. Okay, so now that we got that all cleared up, now we can go to constructing our actual distribution, which is the one-dimensional t-table that will then build our histogram off of. So here's the part. You want to make sure you're in column D now. You want to left-click and hold D1 and then drag down to D6 and then let go. So now you've selected D1 through D6. We're going to drop numbers into there. So now I'm going to left click up in the formula bar, okay, and I'm going to type equals frequency. I'm going to hit left parentheses. Now I've got to tell it where my data is. Now my data is in cells A1 through A50. That's my data. Then I'm going to hit a comma, and then it wants to know where those bins are, those divider bins. And the divider bins are in C1 C5. So that's the range of values. Okay? Now at this point, you don't press just enter. What I like to do is I like to hold down Control and Shift with my left hand, and then press enter with my right. And when that happens, it turns the command that you had typed. You may have noticed up here, it got little, I forget what these things are called, these little dog-eared parentheses. They're called array symbols in Microsoft Excel. And notice it now has a 5, a 20, a 15, an 8, a 2, and a 0. What that means are, there are 5 data points in column A that are 28 or lower. There's one of them right there. There's a 27. There are 20 data points that are 32 or lower, but larger than this 28. So for example, that 30, that 31, that 32, and so forth. There are 15 data points that are 36 or lower, but above 32. There are 8 data points that are 40 or lower, but above 36. There are 2 that are 44 or lower, but above 40. And there are 0 that are strictly above 40. Now we'll come back to that when we make the histogram. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to actually create the histogram. You've got, and if you're following the directions from the actual project that I typed up and distributed to you guys, I've got these two columns in different places. Totally irrelevant. It's okay that they're here. What you're going to do is left click and hold B1 through B6. Now hold down the control key and D1 through D6 at the same time. And that's now got your two columns selected. The B column is going to be your horizontal axis, and your D column is going to be your vertical axis. You're going to go up to Insert, and Excel calls these column charts, and the very first one that you pick is just a clustered column. Boom! And when you press Enter, there she is. There she is in all of her glory. I'm going to shrink it down a little tiny bit. And at this point, you're technically done. I mean, that is a histogram, and you're finished. But I'm going to show you a few ways to spruce it up and to make it look a little bit better. So, but you are done as far as the heavy lifting goes. So let's edit it a little bit. First of all, I have no idea what I'm looking at. What is 25 to 28, 29 to 32, 33 to 36, and so forth? What are those things? Well, those things are miles per gallon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that, click on the graph anywhere, and notice how you get a little Chart Tools tab up here. I'm going to go to Layout, and Layout allows me to create what are called axis titles. So I'm going to left click on that, and I'm going to left click on the primary horizontal axis title. And I'm going to go with title below axis. And right there, I'm going to type miles, per gallon. And then press Enter. And then you've got yourself a nice label that you now know what you're looking at up here. I'm going to also, I think, make the font smaller on these miles per gallon, 33 to 36 and so forth. So I left clicked on it once. I'm going to go to Home, and then I can just change the font size here, like change it down to 8 or something like that. And you have to realize too, I've got this thing zoomed up to 190. So if I zoom it back to 100, it's going to be exceptionally small. But for illustrative purposes, I'm going to blow it up. You can mess with the fonts all you want. This thing out here, this series 1, it's a legend. I'm just going to left click on it and delete it. We're not going to need a legend because the graph will be self-explanatory. There's no need for a legend. Legends are nice when you have more than one set of bars. Very nice, actually, when you have more than one set of bars, but I only have one. So over here, this vertical axis, I'm going to go back to Layout, and I'm going to add an axis title on the vertical axis. You've got some choices here. I kind of like the horizontal one. It shoves everything over to make room. And what that is, I like to call that just frequency, because that's really all it is. It's how many are in this grouping, 25 to 28. How frequently does that grouping occur? It occurs 5 times. It occurs 20 times in the next. It occurs 15 times in the next, and so forth and so on. So I like just to call it frequency. You can call it number of cars with those miles per gallon measures or something like that. But I mean, frequency honestly does that just fine. As far as the entire chart, you probably should give it a title. You have a choice between centered overlay, which puts it right there, or you have above chart, which shoves the chart down. I kind of like that one. And what I'm going to call it is fuel economy. I spelled that right? I did. For a 1993 Saturn wagon. Boom. Look at that. Look how nice that looks. Looks pretty sharp. And at this point, you can dork around with other things. You can shrink the numbers down so that the vertical axis matches the horizontal. If you want, you can bold those numbers. Whoops. What did I just do? There we go. You can bold the numbers, or you can leave them unbolded. You can change colors on. There's lots of things you can do, but that just gets you started, at least get you labeling the axes, labeling the chart. One thing a lot of folks like to do, Excel defaults when it makes histograms and the bars are spaced. I will show you one thing you can do that is not super important, because this is less of a mathematical chart than it is a statistical chart, but you can make these bars wider so they actually fill out each other and fill out and touch each other. I'll tell you why you want to do that in a second. So right click on the bars, and when it didn't work. Format data series. Boom, left click on that. And notice it says gap width right here, gap width, no gap. If you slide this guy all the way to no gap and then hit close, you'll see the bars are now all the way touching each other. Now, I want to do one more thing before I explain why you might want to do that or why you might not want to do that. Right-click on it again, Format Data Series, Border Color. I'm left-clicking now. Solid Line. I'm going to change the color so it isn't the same color as the bars. I'm going to make it black. I tend to do that. And then border styles, I like to make it a little bit thicker. What I'll do is I'm going to move this over so you can see the lines kind of progressing as I click through. And notice how it's getting larger as I do that. So now what you have is you've got these borders that are actually separating the bars. And there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with these bars. I'll show you for example. That fill is now currently blue. Okay, and it says automatic. You can do what's called a gradient fill that actually fades the color between, and you can kind of dork with that all you want. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do to have fun with it. But the important thing that I just showed you was how to make the bars touch each other. And the reason for that is, like I said, it's more mathematical than statistical. What a lot of folks want to do is they want to be able to make sure this bar actually spans from 25 to 28. And this one from 29 to 32. The reason I say it's not that big of a deal is, technically speaking, this point right here, this point separates with one single point data that isn't necessarily rounded off. I mentioned that in the chalkboard part of the video. That's why it's not crucially important that it does that. But some people like the bars to touch. It's up to you, honestly. It's up to you and whatever application you're using it for. But I think that takes us to the end, and I think we've got ourselves a nice little tutorial for getting histograms together. I hope you have some fun with it, and I hope you're able to take it even further and explore. So I hope it helped, and we'll talk to you in class.